Dennis, do you know the one about the little girl walking along a forest path and she met a frog?
Which one?
Well, a little girl walks along a forest path and she meets a frog, and the frog says, "Pick me up and give me a kiss and I'll turn into a viola player." So the little girl picked him up and put him in her pocket and carried on down the path. "Hey," says the frog, "what about the kiss?" And the little girl said, "I think you've got a great future as a talking frog." Well, the works wanted to find out more about this cultural phenomenon of our time, the viola joke, and by an extraordinary stroke of luck, the world expert, Professor von Rowbotham of the Dachdecker Institute for Scherz- und Spielwissenschaft, Montevideo, just happens to be in London.
Wirklich?
I think it is very important to try to analyze why we have viola jokes, and principally the viola joke only. I have never heard, for instance, an oboe joke, nor have I heard one about the xylophone. Once I heard a double bass joke, but even that was adaptable to the viola. In my study of viola jokes, apart from the analysis of the humour, they seem to occur for several reasons.
And what are those reasons?
It seems that viola players are mistakenly presumed to have the least important role in the string family, therefore have acquired only the meanest level of competence needed for doing the job. It is also perhaps that they are the last in a shrinking race of amateurs. For instance, there are viola-playing farmers, composers, financial advisors, record producers, and Lord help us, conductors. They need putting down, apparently, because having less to do in the way of playing actual notes, they throw their intellectual weight around to compensate.
So, are you saying, Professor Rowbotham, that as enforced listeners in the musical environment, they have developed other faculties? In other words, mutated from specialist instrumental technicians into more complete musical entities, and beyond, into computing and composing, thus inspiring ridicule?
Exactly. Their heads, growing always bigger in inverse proportion to their techniques, have pushed other members of the musical profession into fun-poking, whilst the breed, oversensitive, underqualified, and, of course, utterly without humour, gets on with thinking and writing.
Well, can you name a great composer who played the viola?
Well, there are one or two. Let me see now. Bach was an accomplished violist. Beethoven played. Sibelius, Dvorak, Mozart, of course, it was his favourite instrument. Schubert, to say nothing of Vaughan Williams, Hindemith, Frank Bridge, Eric Coates, Tibor Shirley, Watson Forbes. But how many clarinetists have made the grade, or horn players? Richard Strauss's father played the horn, but it took one more generation to produce a composer. But you see, that is the price they pay for being professional thoroughbreds, whereas the violist, the complete musician, gets a rough time for it.
I see. Now, Professor, having enlightened us on the reasons for there being viola jokes, perhaps you could give us an example.
This is the first one I ever heard back in 1982 and set the tone for all viola jokes. What is the difference between a violin and a viola?
I don't know.
A viola burns longer. Try this one. If you are lost in the desert, who do you ask for directions out of the following? A good viola player, a bad viola player, or an ice cream salesman?
Well, I guess the bad viola player.
Of course, because the other two would be figments of the imagination. Bravo. Now, what is the difference in the examination requirements of Grade 1 and Grade 2 viola?
Oh, I know that one. In Grade 2, you have to hold the bow from memory.
Very good. Listen to this conversation now between two viola players I taped last Saturday at the Barbican.
Oh, hello, Sid. How are you? Oh, fine, thanks very much. I went to a concert last night. Oh, that's nice. What were in programme? Oh, it were lovely. All Beethoven. He finished with the Hammer Clavier, and in the first half he played the Moonlight and Pathetique sonatas, and started the concert with that piece that begins with a trill. Begins with a trill? I don't know any Beethoven piece that begins with a trill. How did it go? You know, the one that goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
This illustrates one of the three most common types of viola joke. Freud, in his book of 1905, Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious, breaks down into various categories the joke and its components. For instance, there is the conceptual joke, often a double meaning with allusion, the unification joke, the displacement joke, etc. In the viola world, we find there are three basic types, with some variation and overlapping, which all in the end fall towards a type known as the tendentious joke. i.e. a leaning towards the making of a particular point.
Oh, well, could you provide us then with a basic example of a tendentious joke?
Certainly. How can you spot the difference between a squashed hedgehog in the road and a viola player? There are always tire marks in front of a hedgehog. This employs a technique of illusion by omission. What is alluded to is the desired agreement in the hypothesis of viola players being worthless, more so than the humble hedgehog, and omitting the statement that the motorist would not bother to attempt to brake in front of a viola player.
Well, why is this funnier when it's applied to viola players? Surely a bass player would be just as funny.
Well, you are right, but as I said earlier, there are bass jokes, and also they know their place. Drinking beer, playing cards, and the low notes, bass players are relaxed, easygoing people. The violist feels like a hybrid, a frustrated fiddler, minus repertoire, thus minus the incentive to be as proficient. There is a whole socio-psychology here, which would require lengthy probing. Putting it simply, one can do Paganini on a double bass, but who cares? But if you cannot play it on a viola, where is your justification? The viola is similar in size to the violin, taking only longer to burn, as we know, but therein lies an unfulfilled obligation, burning in the subconscious, and players of other instruments have cottoned onto this by lampooning the outward manifestations of such a complex.
Many thanks to Professor von Rowbotham, obviously a viola player himself.